I've been giving Google a lot of crap recently, but I have to say, and I have to be completely honest, the Google Home Max is my favorite Google hardware product of all time. So this was definitely an interesting product to me because after reviewing the Home Mini, I was getting a taste of the Google Assistant. But of course, my biggest complaint with it is that it was really just that. It was just the digital assistant. There wasn't a really good sound experience. With the Home Mini, if you played it quietly in the background, it was fine, but it definitely was not built on sound, and that's because it was cheap. I'm fine with that. But it was very interesting to see Google do something right and say we're gonna make the cheapest possible speaker and also the most expensive smart speaker currently on the market. Even when Apple's HomePod is introduced, the Google Home Max is still $50 more. So now with this thing having the emphasis of being a good sounding speaker, I've definitely noticed the quality put into it. Basses sound incredibly bassy and quality is definitely top notch, and just overall volume, I have to say, is a tad overwhelming. In fact, one of the biggest problems, and likely the only problem I have with the Google Home Max, is that I think it's a little bit overkill for the home title. Google now has 3 speakers in this selection of smart speakers, one that's made to be cheap, one that's made to sound a little bit better but come in at a larger price tag and provide you with the Google Assistant, and then there's this thing, the Google Home Max. And I have to say, if you live in a household or if you live in an apartment, there's probably very minimal times you'll actually be using this thing over 70% volume. It gets loud, and I mean shaking the wall loud. I think that the pictures on the Google store do not do it justice. This is a very large device. When I'm just holding it in front of you, it may not seem like it, but it is heavy, and this is absolutely packed to the brim with quality sounding speakers that sound great. And I gotta say, I'm not even sure that they should give this the home title, that idea that these can be used in your home. I think this should actually be more oriented towards studios, or if you're in an office space, like a large one. I would more compare this to something like if you have a bar or you own a restaurant of some kind. This is a device that will fill a very large room with premium sounding audio, and not even at full volume. Like college kids living in dorms, in apartments, this is definitely not for you. Sounds really good, but again, you're gonna get yelled at if you turn this thing above 70 or even 60%. It is so dang loud. They weren't kidding when they put Max in the title. This is for someone who has to fill a very large room with a ton of audio. And while I'm listing that as a con with this thing, like the problem is it's not really meant for the home, that's actually, you know, a really great problem to have, because of course, if you actually just want really premium sounding audio, you could just never turn this thing above 50%, and then your neighbors probably won't get mad at you and you'll still have a pretty good speaker. But for us Tailosive here at the office, we wait until all of the offices around us go home, because usually we're working here late into the night, so we waited until everyone of the building was gone. We can of course control the volume from the Google Home Max from my phone, so we stood outside and cranked this thing up to 100, and we could hear it a good 50 feet from the building. It's that insanely loud. So again, I have to repeat, if you live in a very large household where neighbors are not anywhere nearby, sure, maybe it's really cool to blare this thing, but then again, you can't really carry out a conversation with the Google Home Max at full volume. So sorry, I kind of go off on a tangent on that point, but I just have to emphasize this thing is louder than you think it is, and it really shouldn't be in the field competing with the Home Mini or the regular Google Home. I feel like this is a whole different genre of speaker. It should be more compared to the kind of speakers you get for your car, or incredibly large speakers like DJs use at prom. That's really what this is for. It's not really just like living room audio, because if you just happen to walk in and say, set the volume to 80%, it will rattle the house. So this is a great problem to have as someone who has an office space and likes to hear those basses and those really crisp trebles travel far and reach from wall to wall throughout the entire office, especially when no one's here. Then it is great for that. It's completely overkill, and as an Apple sheep, I really appreciate a company going all in and saying that, yeah, this is the most expensive, but it is the best. One amazing thing that we already saw with the Google Home Mini is that it can hear you from very far away. Almost freakishly far away. Like you can be very far away from the Home Mini and it'll still pick you up. What's more impressive with the Home Max is that even when it's playing at these crazy high volumes, we've had it playing at 80, 90, even 100%. If you're within a 6-foot radius of it and you say, hello Google, it will still hear you and lower the volume and hear your next command. It's amazing that the microphones are able to pick that up. I'm very impressed with that because I can barely hear myself think when it's playing that loud, but it can still decipher that hello Google phrase through all of this noise. The next thing I think they did that was really thought out was this little docking pad here. So all it really is this little rubber base that you can either attach to the bottom of the Google Home Max, and it is magnetic if you want to stand it in this orientation, or if you'd rather do it in landscape mode, it has magnets right there as well. So it can just snap on like this very simply, and they actually have lights installed in on the device that work in either orientation, which is interesting that a device like this actually has an accelerometer built in. You don't really think about that. But if you mount the Google Home Max on this side, the Google Assistant will actually say, hey, your Google Home Max is upside down.
By the way, the Google Home is upside down. It'll work best if you turn it over.
And you're also really not meant to put it on this side either, because they have this giant kind of trackpad surface where you can adjust the volume. And it's actually a lot more of it a touch surface than you would think. With the pictures of it online, and as you can see here, there's just one little bar on top, just barely etched in there. You can barely see it. But actually, it starts registering your volume at about right here. And then you can scroll all the way across to adjust your volume. Or of course, you can just tap right in the center to pause or play your music. Very clever, very easy way to adjust your volume. And like I said, very well thought out product. Works in different orientations, very easy to use. Gives those professionals that need them out there the options with USB-C and the audio jack. Not that I'm a huge fan of it, but still. For those pros out there who need to connect lots of them, this has the option too, and even a mute switch if you don't want the Google Assistant listening. So like I've said before, with this smart speaker craze that we're seeing all companies now participate in, I do agree that it should be very, very important to put a focus on sound quality. That's why I wasn't terribly crazy about the Google Home Mini, and thanks to you generous fans, I've now put them in all different rooms around the office and at home to feel what it's like to have Google Home Minis all over the place, to have access to them everywhere. However, I still am more impressed and more grateful that I invested in the far more expensive, I know, but far better Google Home Max because of this intensely really great sounding quality. And I want to give credit where credit is due. I know on this channel, I do not have a history of being nice to Google. I am not a fan of the Pixel lineup, and that's not me being biased against them. Maybe I am, but I legitimately don't believe they're good hardware. In the Google Home Mini, I look at as being more of a toy because it's cheap and it doesn't sound very good. But with the Google Home Max, even though it's more expensive, I know, I definitely feel like this is a good investment. This is a good product for someone who can use this kind of audio. And I'm definitely very, very happy I bought it. Once I get my iMac Pro, I'm planning on pairing it with it to have like this ultra incredibly loud desktop experience along with the 5K display. I think that space gray will look excellent with all of that combined. But I think the main reason I love this device so much more is because the primary focus of the device is on the speaker itself, because that's what these devices are. The thing I've noticed with the Google Assistant, both on this and on the Google Home Minis, is that while they are the smartest digital assistant, that by no means is saying much. There's still a ton of things they don't know. There's still a ton of things that she can't do that I think she definitely could. And I'll talk more about this in my smart home Google Assistant ecosystem I've been building, because so many people said you're not experiencing the Home Mini correctly until you have those smart home accessories that work with it. So I've been installing those and I've been trying them out. And there's very simple things I feel like the Google Assistant could do and yet doesn't, as well as just going off all the time when you don't really want it to, or saying simple things like when you're listening to a podcast on it, say, hello Google, just rewind the podcast to the beginning. And she'll be like, sorry, I cannot rewind the podcast to the beginning yet. It's like, you heard me, but you're not letting that action go through. Or if we want to turn on the outside lights, she'll say, sorry, I don't know what you mean, because we have to say outdoor lights. I wish the Google Assistant could understand context and just be like, oh, okay. Or why can't you say, hey, turn on the outdoor lights and make them this color and also start playing this music in this room? I thought the Google Assistant understood context, and yet when you tell it to do more than one thing, it starts to get confused. So my recommendation anyway about the Google Home Max is that it's a great product. Definitely my favorite Google hardware device of all time. I'm very, very grateful I bought it, and yet it's definitely not because of the Google Assistant. The Google Assistant is probably the worst part of it. What it is good for is starting music. When I need to play a certain song, I just tell it to, and it can do it. That's helpful. But again, not my favorite part of the product. I love how great it sounds. I love how smart it is designed, that you can turn it into a Bluetooth speaker or plug a headphone jack into it, or USB-C. The last port is still an option. You can use it in different orientations with the included magnetic pad. It's just so much of it was so well well thought out, and I'm just very much enjoying it. You know, they keep advertising the Google Home Max with 2 speakers paired to each other, and this thing is so crazy loud. I can't even imagine why you would want to or who would need to. I mean, I guess it looks right on a desk to have 2 speakers next to each other, but still, 2 of these would be such overkill. I can't imagine it. I don't plan on getting a second one, though I do definitely plan on getting the HomePod when that's available and comparing to it. My early predictions right now is I don't think the HomePod's gonna sound as loud, because I think the HomePod is gonna be a speaker mainly based for, you know, the living room, for people's general homes, whereas the Google Home Max, while it has the home in the name, I definitely don't think is good for most people's homes. Average square footage for middle-class families, this thing gets way too loud, whereas I think the HomePod is gonna have pretty good sound. It's gonna get pretty loud, but definitely not like shake the walls loud. Definitely a lot smaller than the Google Home Max if you look up the tech specs. But yeah, of course, that big debate is gonna be like, well, the HomePod is only $50 cheaper, so why not just get the Home Max, because it's not that much more and it gives you more options down the road if you ever want to go blaring audio. And of course, everyone will bring up how Siri's dumb compared to the Google Assistant, so we'll have that debate later. But as of now, I'm just very, very happy with it. I'm glad I bought it, and if you could see yourself using it in a large amount of space where you're not going to be bothering your neighbors, then the Google Home Max is definitely worth investing in. I think you'll enjoy it, and if it's available at a Best Buy or somewhere, definitely try listening to it. It sounds amazing. Let me know what you think of the Google Home Max in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.